Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's fantastic that we are able to meet in person today. I think we got so used to the virtual scenario, and some of us are having some difficulty in getting back into the swing of things of in-person events. As far as the Q&A session is concerned, we're going to be taking you live, so you're going to feel very much part and parcel of the process here this afternoon, and I will be facilitating that Q&A session. But before we get any further, I just want to take this opportunity, Prof, of saying thank you so much, Prof Klopper, to you, the Vinci team, Sushi. Wow, this is what you do, and this is what you relish in. So thank you very, very much for the professional, the efficient manner in which you've made this happen. I'm blown away. So thank you so much to everyone at Vinci who's made this possible. Thank you, Sushi. It's always whether I flip a coin to say, do I do the concluding remarks or thank you, or do I do the opening? But in this instance, doing the opening is a lot easier. Someone like Wayne Duvenage needs no introduction. I've heard him being referred to as controversial. I've heard courageous. I've heard he loves robust debate. But above all, his favorite pastime is holding politicians' feet to the fire. And it's on that note that I want to set the scene for you today, Wayne. Over the past few weeks, in my capacity as CEO of Sakencham, I've had the privilege of opening and hosting speakers of different ilk, people with different convictions. But without exception, as recently as 2 weeks ago, I think, Julie, we had someone representing business, and he used the word that business is often complicit in what is happening out there. We need to stand up and let our voices be heard, always constructively and engaging, and have no fear of the consequences. There's no place for the faint of heart anymore, guys. We're in this together. We need to start changing the landscape. We need to start changing the narrative. And we're only going to do that if we stand up and have a collective voice. Holding our politicians and those tasked to serve the communities and the broader public. We talk glibly of the impoverished, of the marginalized. But the policies and plans that are often tabled 10, 12 years ago are still to see the light of day today. We need to change that if we're going to make any difference. I know that you are going to follow that theme this afternoon, Wayne, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And I urge each and every one of us, when we leave today, particularly those online, go back into your respective communities, into your companies, put your hands up and say, enough's enough. Let's start engaging. But I caution, let's do it constructively, meaningfully, that we can make a difference. Wayne, without any further ado, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for being here and for the time and the opportunity. So I set the scene by looking back 5 years ago, what was happening at that time. And in 2017, at this time, I think Jacob Zuma was going into his fourth vote of no confidence situation in Parliament. But prior to that, Thuli Madonsela had already filed her state of capture report. And then we saw Jacob Zuma remove Pravin Gordhan and Sibisi Jonas from the Ministry of Treasury, Finance. A week after that, within that whole week, civil society had convened a march around the country, not just in Pretoria, which is where it was intended to be, as we started to launch that march against hands of Treasury. So people around the country said, we also want to march. And it was lovely to watch that energy. We said, just do what you got to do, gave them some guidelines. 200,000 people marched in Cape Town, collectively, Joburg, Pretoria, Durban, Mbombela, everywhere. So that was very uplifting, because you don't see middle class marching. And it was a middle class march. It wasn't a labor protest. This is where businesses were giving their staff the day off on that Friday, the 7th of April, 2017. And it said a lot to what was coming. And then thereafter, as you could see, Jacob Zuma had narrowly escaped being impeached because it was a vote held in confidence, in secret. But just prior to that, we saw, well, we were in the situation where we had to, the Gupta leaks had come out in May. And so all the speculation around and media headlines today, gone tomorrow, that really did shed a lot of light, having the Gupta leaks. And we got a copy of those and started working through it. Put our report to Parliament about no room to hide for a president who's been caught in the act. And so things started to flow. But the fact that he wasn't impeached was a bit of a disappointment for the country, and there were two more events that had to happen. The next one was the December 2017 ANC elections. And Jacob Zuma was fortunately removed by a miracle, some say, by obviously some backroom dealing. But nobody thought that would happen. And I don't know if you can remember the look on Jacob Zuma's face. But he started to dawn on him very quickly what was coming, because all the captured institutions were now going to be challenged. So Tom Moyane and SARS and Abrams and the NPA, the Hawks, all of those people that he had put into those positions were going to be undone. And so they were. And I think for many of us, we sat back and felt relief, especially when President Ramaphosa gave his Tumamina speech. We're on a new path. And literally, for us as a civil society organization, we asked ourselves the question, what does that look like for us as we try and hold government to account? Is there going to be a government that needs to be held to account? Or is it going to change? Well, it didn't change. And we sit here 5 years later in the same space, a new set of events, a December election coming up, and a national elections just about less than 18 months thereafter. And that's the position we're in right now. So if we haven't got to where we should have been and where we thought we could have been, why is that? And what do we have to do now going forward? And even if there is the change that we think is going to happen, what is civil society's role? What is our role as business? What is our role as academia? What is our role as faith-based leadership groups and so forth? There's a lot of civil society organizations out there that are trying to make the best and introduce or force government's hand into introducing the prosperity, the levels that we know we are so capable of. And this is what frustrates us. We know what we are capable of as a country. We have resources like you cannot believe, from a natural resources point of view, a beauty, tourism point of view. 10% of Australia's tourism figure. Yet we're on the same timeline. You get on a plane in Europe, overnight you're in South Africa. If you want to go to Australia, you have to travel for a day. And what are you going there for? When you compare what we have, they have a rock and a kangaroo and a barrier reef. I mean, we have so much going for us. And yet we seem to just shut it all down. So I don't have to tell you, unless you have competence and unless you drive competence into government leadership, we're not going to get where we have to be. And while you have a government that has a cadre deployment, and I think cadre deployment is common around the world, so it's not the issue of cadre deployment, it's the issue of cadre deployment from a position of putting in people that are pliable, that can continue the plundering and the corruption that happens. So we see this right down to local government level, and some of our towns have been decimated, almost beyond recovery. A lot of them are now having to turn themselves around, and it's a long journey, but it's very doable. I was asked the other day why, local government and many municipalities don't get enough money. They will never be able to survive, but that's wrong. If you just look and compare towns, similar size, similar structures, similar areas and regions, and population sizes, some thrive and others don't. And that's when you compare why, it is just leadership. I mean, we've seen in big multi-billion rand municipalities, the CFO is a person who I wouldn't have put in as a bookkeeper in business where I worked. Seriously, a diploma in finance. And how do you expect that person to run the finances, complex finances of a city? That's the issue that we have. So we've got to address that, and this journey that we're on is an incredible one, because from a civil society point of view, we had to make this decision: do we do NGO space exposure as usual, or do we do things differently? In other words, do we hold people to account? Because that's the only way we can bring about change. And so, as we've built our structure and the governance that comes with civil activism, we've had to make sure that our governance is in place, because if we don't have our governance in place, how can you expect government to do so? And put the people into the positions of project management, investigations. You can't shoot from the hip, you've got to get the facts. And it's been a really interesting journey, I must say. There's no book written when it comes to developing a civil activist organization like we've done. It's not like running a hotel or a restaurant. It's stuff that you develop, especially when you bring in and build your own legal teams. The reason we do that is to make sure that we save costs on litigation. Litigation is an accountability measure that we have to use, and we don't use enough of it in this country. So here's our frustration and our change in the tack that we have to take. And our call on civil society and business in particular is that if we're going to hold people to account and you're going to litigate, we can litigate, as we have demonstrated, a lot cheaper and a lot faster than it does normally take, because we've got our own advocate and legal team. So we help build the case for the lawyers. You've still got to go through lawyers and senior counsel when it comes to putting the actual case together. But if you take a lot of the work away, you get there a lot quicker and a lot cheaper, and that's very, very important for us. So what we did on the Duvenage delinquent director case, because the NPA and nobody was acting, is, well, there are many ways to hold people to account. It's not a one bullet, it's not a one situation. You can, the pain of being declared a delinquent director is massive for her. Can never sit on a board again, can never chair. There's a Jacob Zuma Foundation. As much as he would like her to be the chairperson, she can't be. She's disqualified in CIPC. But then the debt that starts to run up, she owes us 6 million rand from that case. And we have to go and fetch that money. And if that means sequestrating her, that's what we're going to do. These are the types of things that are following through. It takes a long time. You have to have resilience. You have to have the patience. But in saying all of that, I understand and know that business is focused on business. It doesn't have the time, first of all, to deal with these issues, or deal with issues that are normally outside the boundaries of its operations. But I think what we've got to start doing is asking ourselves as business leaders, how do we step back and understand that we don't live in an island, that we don't live in this little microcosm of our own world and our own industries, and whatever happens out there doesn't matter, because it does. And if South Africa collapses, our businesses collapse. So I find it very strange that when it comes to challenging big issues in government, big business issues, that business pulls back, that it doesn't want to put its head above the parapet. And I've been there, I understand that. When we had to tackle the e-toll matter, after convincing businesses was a very necessary challenge, and got as far as we did, we saw government leaning on our members. We saw our members running, our supporters, running for the hills, because on the boards of those businesses were what I call the Politburo. These are individuals that make sure that the ANC benefits and that those companies are in the limelight and in the procurement lists and opportunities. And that's what's so wrong. And so once business left, we had to unpack our strategy and say, well, we've got to be relevant to society, not to business. So it was a fortunate thing in one way, but we sit here today saying, but business is society as well. It's not on its own. It's a factor, it's a sector of society. You have your citizens, you have your interest groups, you have your business associations, the churches, academia, as we say, many sectors of civil society. But when we set up, and when the Helen Suzman Foundation sets up its entity, AfriForum, Ahmed Katrada Foundation, Section 27, each one specializing in its area of competence, specializing in its own mandates, having its own boards, having its own agendas. I often get asked, why aren't we all working together? But we just can't. It's impossible. It's like herding cats. I remember trying to get one letter on the nuclear deal signed by 5 different organizations, and it took 6 days to get people to agree to it. And one organization wanted the second paragraph shortened because it didn't include women or children or disabled. It was just crazy. And we understand their need to have their issues in the big picture of what we were trying to challenge. But you just can't get consensus all the time. So that's understandable, and yet we're also linked in so many of the things that we challenge, but we've got to let ourselves and each other get on with the work that we do. That's the reality in civil society. So let's talk about what's going to happen, I think, in December. It's a case of better the devil you know than you don't know in our situation. We've got 2 factions fighting for the control of the ANC. And if the Jacob Zuma faction gets control again, we are in trouble. Fortunately, it'll be trouble for about 14 months, 15 months, and then the next elections come. If not, then the next elections still come, and that's where the big change has to happen. Unfortunately, in 2019 or 2018, when President Ramaphosa took control and the speeches were good, the talk was good, but the action didn't happen. So we still sit here now 4 years later, and we know not really closer to where we can and should have been. Of course, the NPA is being turned around, but the decimation has been deep and it's taking a lot of time. But things are happening. SARS is being fixed by Edward Kiseveda. There's so much good that's happening behind the scenes. So that's quite exciting. But why are we struggling with the investment? Why are we struggling with what has to happen to get our unemployment sorted out, our education system sorted out? Policing, it's just an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke to see what's happening with our police force. Extremely unprofessional. Lack of leadership, lack of vision, lack of ability to turn this institution around. But again, as I said earlier, you know this. What we need to do is make sure that when we get into the 2024 situation, is that the pressure is so big that the change has to happen. Now, I think what will happen in December is that Ramaphosa's hands are going to be less shackled. He might have the NEC and the people inside that are going to support the visionary leadership and the stronger leadership that we've all expected of him. And we know that is possible. But in a situation where he can be removed tomorrow, it's very difficult. I can understand his predicament. So it's slowly moving forward, but that's creating a lot of damage. Some of the things that we're facing now with high petrol prices and inflation are not unique to us. These are international issues. What is unique to us is the fact that we have an energy crisis. But that crisis has fortunately brought about an energy plan which was tabled recently, which should have been tabled 2-3 years ago. So yes, it's late, better late than never, but we've got a lot of catching up to do. But what it has done is set free this whole entire privatization or a competitive and far more sustainable energy supply for this country going forward. So I think our energy woes in the next few years are going to be sorted out, and that's a big catalyst for the growth that we need. With that, if the leadership can come, and I think our leadership in 2024 will be a coalition government, without a doubt. It is going to be a case of anyone but the ANC, and we've seen it in the microcosms of local government. So if you'd have said to me in October, just before the November elections last year, will the ANC not rule in all 3 metros, in 4, in fact 4, with Mogale, eThekwini, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, Joburg. that the DA would be leading with not a majority, 35, 34, 25%, 28% in some of them. I think the answer to that is no, probably not. And if they did, it would be a case of somebody crossing the floor, one or two people, and upsetting that apple cart, as we saw in the prior local space. But it's holding ground. But is it sustainable? You know, people or political parties with completely different ideologies. How do you keep the EFF and the DA working together? And that's the trick, and they've been able to pull it off for some time now, without having to do deals like they did in the prior administration in local government. So if this is the microcosm, if this is what's happening now, we think that's going to happen in 2024. It will be a case of anybody but the ANC. Now, what does that look like, and how does that play out? Well, I don't know if it looks like a John Steenhuisen becoming a president. I can't see that. What does it look like from a Songezo Zibi maybe point of view? Excuse me, from a Herman Mashaba point of view? DA coalitions, you know, who knows? But we're going to see some very, very interesting times going forward from that point of view. But what that looks like, or what might transpire, we sit at OUTA and ask ourselves these questions. Aside from the political dynamics, we've got so much work to do as a country. How does civil society and how does business become part of the change and the solution for this country? Because it's not all going to come from politicians, I can tell you that. And in this space of politics, it is a case, unfortunately, of you can't leave the people in charge if they created the problems. There has to be an absolute clean out, and unless the ANC is removed, you will have trying to fix the problems with the same people who made them. That's not going to happen. It just doesn't work in any situation. So what do we have to do? Well, we've had to rethink our strategy. So while we've got our accountability division that builds these cases and holds politicians to account and people who administer taxpayers' money, we've had to also say, how do we build collective solutions that force government to be more transparent and to react and change and introduce the policies and service delivery that we need. And that's where we're in quite an exciting phase at the moment. So I'll tell you a couple of them. For instance, we built an app now. It's called the Link app, where Joburg. Let me tell you this quick short story. Joburg Roads Agency built an app. This is technology where on your phone you can report a pothole, traffic light out. Very nice, very good, but it didn't work, and they paid 20 million rand for it. And the guys who built it for them held them to ransom on it. So we've done the same thing, but the Joburg City app works in Joburg only. Ekurhuleni's got their own. Tshwane are trying to build their own. Cape Town's trying to build their own. We've built a national app. Same app, doesn't matter where you are, geolocates the incident. If there's one traffic light and 50 people report it, it's one traffic light with 50 people reporting it. It sends the messages straight to the right departments, and we've given it for free to every municipality. It cost us millions, so we put it in place, and we go to the municipalities and say, there it is. The reaction is, but we don't like that because it exposes us, because if we don't fix it, then we look useless. And we say, well, that's exactly the issue. But why do you see it that way? Why don't you turn that attitude on its head and say to yourself, make it easy for people to give you the information so that you can get to fixing. And if you're not going to fix it, if you put your head in the sand and pretend if I don't see it, I don't have to fix it, well, then you will continue to fail your citizens. So slowly we're getting through to municipal management to get them to become more citizen-centric and customer-centric and realize that this is the right way to go. Some of the municipalities are now calling, and we're having to guide them through that process. But it's quite exciting space. Another platform we've just launched is the Community Action Network, where we're giving resident associations the ability to be empowered on their rights to challenge municipalities. And what we found is, in Joburg alone, there must be 100 resident associations, community associations, business chambers. And they're all trying to challenge the same municipality, but there's no networking. And they're fighting the same fights, but from a different perspective. So the beauty of the OUTA's CAN network is that we bring them together. We help them to understand that, if you don't want to hold local government account, stop moaning, stop complaining. If you do participate in these public engagement sessions, in the integrated development plans, get involved, hold your councillors to account by asking the tough questions. And that way, suddenly, we see people who are in retirement to understand finances and engineering coming on board, and we can start making sure that the municipalities do the work that they say they're going to do, that they tender the work properly, that if they're going to lay a trench and put a water system in, that the eyes and ears of civil society now start to hold them to account. So that's quite exciting. Again, millions of rands of trying to develop these platforms. And from that now, what we're seeing flowing is the next one we're wanting to launch now, but we're having to just watch our resources, is WaterCan, the Water Community Action Network. We've decided now that, if government cannot keep the information of our water quality live and accurate and trustable, then how do you know if your water is clean? And what are you going to do about the sewage that runs into rivers and kills the ecosystems, and no one's holding government to account? Now, it's a crime to pump effluent into a river. It's a criminal offense. But civil society doesn't have the information. So we're launching testing kits. We give them out to our water champions who go out there, register, and they start testing the water. And that information is uploaded. We've got to develop an app, another R1 million, so they can photograph it, uploads automatically. And you start to create this heat map. And it's called citizen science, where citizens become part of the solution, providing the information that government just doesn't do. And when they do it, they don't do it properly. So imagine a heat map around the country that tells you what the water quality is, accurately and live at any one time. That's what we need, your drinking water and your river water. With that information, you go to courts. You first start the process of going to see the city manager and saying, you can't pump raw sewage into the river. Well, our water treatment plant's broken. Fix it. And we work with them, but if they don't want to work with us, we put them under pressure, we lay the case, and we have them criminalized. That's accountability through citizens. But to do that, and to clean those rivers, because now we start creating jobs, because the river champion, and you see it with Taryn Johnson on the Henops River, doing brilliant work, you start employing people to clean the rivers. And then you go further upstream where the litter finds its way into the rivers, and you go and train the schools and the headmasters on how they become part of the solution and training their communities to stop the litter, to gather the litter and to start recycling the litter. It's a beautiful plan with a lot of tentacles to it. So that's called citizen science. And what we will do there is turn to businesses. We'll train the water champions to turn to business in the area and say, you're in this area. It affects you. Your water quality in Standerton, in the Henops area, along where tourism hotels are situated on some of these rivers where it's absolutely stinking water coming down past their wedding venues and that. Become part of the solution by supporting us. Support these river champions, water champions, so that we can do the work that you want us to do. So those are just a couple of initiatives, but we're hamstrung because our 45 staff are just flat out in so many other areas. But this is what we call social innovation, and it has to be done. The other ones that are coming is a citizen science-based platform that gets the community to rate issues like schooling. Have the books arrived? Do you have electricity? Do you have running water? Do you have pit toilets? Have they been fixed? Are your teachers at school? All of those things start to develop a heat map on the school quality. And what you start to clearly see is where it's green, it's working. The regional managers are working, the headmasters are working. Where it's red, you've got a problem. And that's the type of thing we can fix through citizen-based applications that feed the information into the 24,000 schools. But citizens run it, not government. You will never trust a government heat map that says our schooling is right. in all these places. The citizens must become part of that. The same thing with clinics. The same thing, so another heat map, people visit clinics every day. Rate it. Rate the situation. So building these dashboards and building this, what we call transparency process is the way we've got to go. Because the more transparent everything is, the quicker you start to hold people to account, the quicker you have information to go to court and hold city managers to account. Without transparency, but I'm not talking about reactive transparency, proactive transparency, ahead of the game. You know, imagine if that Eastern Cape community knew that 12 million rand was being spent on toilets for a new school, 12 million rand for one school. What would have happened? After the fact, it's too late. The money's changed hands. The toilets haven't been built. There's a bit of shouting and life goes on. We have to get the community involved beforehand as it's happening. Building a transparent procurement system for government is easy. They just don't want one. So how do we do it? We force it on them. We bring citizens, we run a citizen-based procurement process where citizens and people inside the communities and businesses load the tenders into our system. And then we start to see, well, who is the best positioned and why? Without usurping transformation, without, we got to bring in the whole transformation process to make sure that communities are involved in these processes. But if it's done the way it is currently done, where friends and family get the jobs at 3 times, 4 times the price, then we have a problem. So running parallel community-based procurement systems that eventually government has no choice but to engage with us on is the way to go. Transparency is the enemy of corruption, and we need to make our systems far more transparent. So all of those initiatives are very possible, are there. Some of them, as I said, we've already built. We're at launch stage on the CAN platform. Water CAN we're running with, but we've still got some more development to do. These are exciting initiatives, but they become citizen-owned. When they're citizen-owned, government will come to this platform to get its information on water quality. And the interesting thing is they know that. In fact, the Department of Water and Sanitation is now working with us, understanding that the citizen science approach is the right way to go. So there's some lights coming on in that space. So my appeal to and message really to yourselves is, Mike, you opened the session on business's role. I think far too often it's a weak excuse not to get involved, not to support. You see, we don't have. And I've been in business, so I understand the fear of being struck off procurement roles. I understand, but if you can't step back and say, well, all right, I'm not going to put my brand at stake here, but there's an industry association that all businesses belong to somewhere. Use your industry association and vote there and put them under pressure to stand up for your industry. Now, I'll give you an example. The National Regulatory and Compliance Standards, NRCS, running under DTR, has got an archaic process in place. Businesses are closing down because it's just too cumbersome to have your products registered in the system through a letter of authority process that takes months. That I remember one a supplier whose goods come from America, the American operations said to the CEO here, listen, we are not going to continue to make old product just so that we give you time to get your government to agree to the standards of this product in 3-4 months' time. We're launching new brands and products across the world. South Africa's 1% of our business close it down. Business gets closed down, jobs are lost. So this is the type, and that's happening in the goods, electronic goods, the domestic appliance goods, everything that needs to be certified, these light bulbs, plugs. So what happens when it's archaic and cumbersome and paper-based? People go below the radar screen. So right now, plugs are coming in, wall plugs, pipes, fittings, from China, from all around the world, that doesn't meet any safety standard. And when you go to the NRCS, as these businesses do, and they say, but there's stuff finding its way onto the shelves of big consumer goods companies. that is not compliant, that if it finds its way into a building, into a house, fire hazard. And the NRC says, we're not going to police that. Go and tell the police. The police don't want to police it. They don't know what to do. It's just a joke. The way you do that is through a self-compliance process. It works in Europe. It'll work here. They don't want to do it. Why? Because they build their own empires. By the way, 2-3 years ago, they had the act changed to remove the board. There's no oversight. They report now to the minister who's too busy to get to them, pay themselves fat salaries, and it's an empire. So business comes to us. We said, why? You've got business associations, go to BUSA. And I work closely with CAS. So eventually we said, we'll do this. But we don't have resources. We don't have the time. We need to bring in the expertise and we'll run this project. Why they came to us is because we have a hard approach to government. We don't pussyfoot. We don't tiptoe around them. We engage properly. We give them opportunities. We meet. But when they get to the stonewall where they don't want to change, you have to go to court. You have to fight hard. You have to threaten that all the fees that they're getting from the various businesses will dry up because we will open a trust account and we will feed the money into that space. So are you ready for that business? After 7-8 years of trying to get this right, now they're ready. This should have been done a long time ago. And now, suddenly, the NRCS are sitting up and listening and saying, okay, we have to engage now because OUTA is involved. So we're doing it with BUSA. That's not really our space. But what is our space is holding government to account. So that's why we're finding a lot of people in industry bodies and entities coming to us saying, can you help? Of course we'll help. But 45 people can't do this work anymore. So our appeal really to business is, to be the active corporate citizen means participate, support. You don't have to do the standing up. Society will do it. We will do it. But then you need to understand that we can't do it without resources. We don't operate on volunteers. We can't. We try to. Volunteers are here today, gone tomorrow. You need longevity. That case against Duvenage took 4 years to finalization. So in this for the long run, we need this expertise and we need to pay market-related salaries. So that's how our model works. And we've got all these potential projects lined up, and as the funding comes in, we will start to open some of these projects. What does funding mean by civil society? Well, 90% of our funds comes from individuals, but it's starting to come from business, more so from small and medium businesses who really are gutful, have had enough now. And the average donation is 300, 400, 500 rand a month. But I say to big business and medium business, what is it worth to you to have an organization like OUTA? Is it worth anything? If it is, what's your lowest paid salaried employee? Why don't you give the equivalent of that and put it into our account once a month? Government doesn't know. We don't have a list that says all these businesses support us. It's confidential. Our information is all backed up offshore. Very robust systems. We've got brilliant IT people that look after our information. Every entity can get a 18A certificate, so your donations are tax exempt because we are a Section 18A entity. And we actually work well with SARS, and they enjoy our work because they know that what we're doing also is good for the country. So it's a matter of holding hands with, and it doesn't have to be OUTA. It can be any organization that you believe is robust enough to do the work that you want us to do as civil society. But I say let's collaborate, let's work together, and let's make sure that the support that is necessary to bring about robust active citizenry with corporate active citizenry makes the change that we have to see. I think it's so exciting. The potential and the opportunities are big. We should have 145 staff, not 45 staff. But it doesn't matter. We will continue to do what we do, and we'll continue to grow. And I just hope that you can spread the word and get more people on board with us so that we can do more of this good work. I'm looking forward to 2024. Looking forward to seeing what happens in December with the ANC. We don't play in politics. We are apolitical. but we are holding politicians to account. So we have to watch the dynamics of politics and the political space. But I think this country is potentially on the cusp of some really exciting catalytic change that will unlock our potential immensely. And if we get there, you just got to think of it from this point of view. If we can get children educated to become employable, if we can start manufacturing and building these industries, and there's no reason why we can't, if we can unlock the tourism, if we can introduce visionary leadership, then this country will be the envy of the world. Seriously, where we were at 5, 6, 7% growth for the first 5 years, off a low base again, we'll go there. And it will be the best place to be. But we've got to really, remove the shackles and the boundaries. And the only way that we do that is by looking government in the eye with a tough stance and say, we're not going to allow you to do this. The workman's compensation situation is a mess. Skills development levy, it's just another tax. Business, when you ask them, are you getting a bang for your buck on skills development levy? It doesn't matter. It's another tax. We are so overtaxed in this country. If you just look at the tax graph from the 260 billion rand some 25 years ago to 1.6 trillion. You can't keep that up. Every year, the taxes go up on property, rates, tariffs, electricity. And so it's becoming very difficult to compete. That's why we have to challenge the NRCS to make business more efficient. We have to challenge workmen's compensation, the road accident fund. It's a nightmare, it's a mess. So we're sitting with government, putting them under pressure to say, how can you have an individual who has got no idea of, in the insurance industry, running a road accident fund? You have to change it. You have to bring in the experts and clean it out. It's corrupt. And there's so much of that all over the place. Driver's licenses. I can't tell you the stuff we see every single day, how they calculate the fuel price. The pressure we put government under to stop increasing these levies by double inflation. Eventually, for the first time this year, the Minister of Finance did not increase the fuel levy. The first time, that and the road accident fund. There was pressure from civil society. And all those small differences add up to a big change in this country. So, come on board with us. If you want to, that's fine. If you can't bring yourself to be there, we understand the pressures. But we'll be that barrier between brands and the work that has to be done. I'm sure there's going to be a few questions, so I'll stop there and look forward to engaging with you guys again, ladies and gents. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Wayne. I'm sure we anticipate a few questions. I think just a reminder to those that are participating virtually, just put your hand up. I'll ask Greg if you wouldn't mind just keeping your eye on the screen there. When the hand goes up, just give me a call, and you can, at my request, just unmute yourself and switch your camera on. So are there any questions in-house? Anything, someone on your mind?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Who is funding the ANC at the moment? Because there's rumor that Patrice Motsepe is the biggest funder of the ANC. But obviously not enough money, otherwise they would have money to pay their salaries and they would have money to pay these poor Indians in Durban that they owe the 100 million rand for the pamphlets.
Yeah.
Surely the Ramaphosa faction has enough money to fund the ANC without blinking an eyelid. And would they not be powerful enough to get rid of the rest of them by just turning around and saying, right, boys, we will fund the ANC, but we will call the shots?
Yeah, look, good point. And the whole transparency around funding, political party funding, has created a whole new dynamic there. But I can tell you now, for the last, since democracy, the ANC was funded through corruption, is still funded through corruption, deals that are done, many deals, and where business is the service provider, they weren't being paid. I know Avis was one of them. I know many people who headed up companies had to stop doing business. They were threatened by the ANC because they weren't providing the services free of charge. It just became a mess. But Let me tell you something about the ETOL, man. You want to know how you get money into political parties offshore? You introduce things like tolling. And there are many others, right down to local government. The corruption that fed through, because it spreads from the top, and it was a catalyst situation with Jacob Zuma. It was do as we can do because you're entitled to. This is how you get funds out the system. That's why municipalities are broke, because nothing flows to where it's supposed to go. We pay for 3 kilometers of road to get 1 kilometer, and that road is poorly managed, poorly maintained, and poorly built. So you have to rebuild them again. Schools cost 3, 4, 5 times the price they should. Why? Because of all the middlemen that get their cut, and the ANC is a big feeder of every single contract that has government involved in it, every single one. I can tell you right now. Let me tell you this question, this situation. You know our long-distance tolling, N3TC, Bakwena, and Track. We've got no problem with public-private partnerships. They work well. But we pay the tolls. And when those schemes are set up, they're 30-year schemes, by the way, build, operate, and transfer. In other words, after 30 years, government takes them back, the infrastructure's there, the private sector's made their money out of it. The contract is that the private sector is allowed to make reasonable profits. Well, they don't define reasonable, but let's just park that one side. We say, hold on a bit. When you did those feasibility studies and those contracts were awarded 22 years ago, 23 years ago, so much has changed. So much of stuff that has moved from rail to road. The tariffs have gone up above inflation. Can we see the numbers? Can we see what's going on here? Is there unreasonable profiteering being made? And they won't give us the numbers. We're now in court to get those figures. Our figures, your figures, you pay those tolls. The law is very clear. Any company that does business with government in a public-private partnerships, books have to be open, and so does government's books. SANRAL has to give us that information. They will not give it to us. Now why? Ask yourself why. That's how the ANC gets money offshore. That's how the ANC is funded. Now, maybe they aren't, but if they don't, in that specific contract, but if they don't give us the information, we smell a rat. And they're fighting like hell to not give us that information. That's one incident. The ETOL matter, our research showed that internationally, the administration costs on electronic tolling systems that are privately run is between 7 and 11%. The ETC contract was 30%. 30%. So more than R1 billion a year on the administration costs was going to flow offshore. Why? Why do you do that to us as citizens, our roads? So when we asked for that information and they were very cagey and wouldn't give it to us, we said, well, then we're going to introduce a public disobedience campaign. We're going to kill the scheme. And they laughed at us. Well, we killed it. Now they're running around trying to implement what we told them 10 years ago, 12 years ago, which had they done at 10 cents ring-fenced on the fuel levy would have paid for the roads. Could have taken the 10 cents away now. Instead, the fuel levy's gone up by R2.65 in that same period. So they got the money through the toll levy, through the fuel levy, and they wanted to slap a toll on. So they would have got 34% of SANRAL's revenue would have come from 1% of the road infrastructure. Here, this Gauteng, and the other provinces moan and say, why should we pay for your roads in Gauteng? And our immediate response is, who's paying for your roads? Yours aren't tolled. Talking about electronic tolling. This is the economic hub of South Africa, of Africa. You know, if we need 8-lane highways, give it to us, because we get goods to and from markets, we get people to and from work properly. And so that's the long answer to your question. The ANC is funded through corruption. Now those taps are being turned off. Those taps are drying up. And the companies that paid the favors to the ANC are now saying, well, you're not going to be around much longer. Why should we? And we're also getting a bit broke now, and we're also worried about what's happening. So those taps are turned off, and now the ANC has to rethink its strategy. But it's trying to survive by not paying. It doesn't even pay SARS, the PAYE of the staff, when it does pay salaries. That's a corrupt entity. I don't know why we spoke to SARS to say, I know you can't publicly display this information, but we hope you're going after them. So, you know, if you want to do business with any company, they need to be tax compliant. The ANC is not tax compliant. I wonder if they've got a tax compliance certificate. They can't have if they're not paying PAYE. So they are in trouble. The ANC will not have more than 45% of the vote in 2024. It will lose Gauteng, and that's the change that we need in this country. They're dying right now, dying rapidly, but we're in a precarious position because we've got to get to 2024. And the stuff that's unraveling right now is a dangerous place for us to be in.
So I was told the other morning by a young African gentleman who's very high up that the $4 million was actually a donation given to the ANC. And Ramaphosa was away. And they stuck it under the furniture there in his house. And that's why you don't hear. That's why they won't allow him to go and say in public what it was or anything.
Yeah, look, we've read the affidavit that Arthur Fraser's given. We don't think that will, the NPA, if you look at it, I mean, it's just a lot of speculation and stuff. Whether it's true or not, that must run its course. I don't think what we've seen, they can prosecute on an affidavit like that. But whether Ramaphosa should have paid tax on money, whether he sold buffalo or not, or cattle, who knows? He must face the music if there's trouble there. Our biggest worry is, imagine if David Mabuza becomes president tomorrow, if something happened. Now, as a deputy president in the last 4 years, what have you heard David Mabuza say in public? I think 3 times I've heard him say so. And one of them in Parliament was, we've got electricity problems because business is booming so much and they're exceeding the demand. I mean, really. Anyway, if you read Rihanna Rousseau's book on predator politics, you'll know that the real David Mabuza, he is corrupt. He is extremely corrupt. And if the civil case that's unfolding with Fred Daniels now on the Mpumalanga deals are finished in court, criminal cases by ourselves and others can be laid, and maybe he has to step aside before December. Hopefully, yeah. It's shocking to see what options the ANC has for us in the absence of Cyril.
Judy Trigurtha.
I've got so many thoughts spinning through my mind, but I don't know, my sense, you obviously really believe in the change that you can, try and make within the constraints of the resources, etc. And I really enjoy the positivity that you're trying to,
bring amidst all the chaos.
foster by, trying to make us all believe that I think there is a way to try and make a difference. And maybe that is getting civil society mobilized. I think on that, it's a worry because South Africans typically are so complacent. You don't often find generally South Africans being prepared to march. You mentioned at the beginning, but it takes a lot to get South Africans to actually prepare to get out there and do things. I know we've got it in us, what we saw after the rioting and protesting last year, and how people just rallied together to come out and clean the streets and clean up. It was amazing to see. So we do have it in there, ingrained in us somewhere, because we all do really want to see things for the better. But I think trying to get us behind, as civil society collective, to make a difference, it's just, I'm glad you believe it can happen. I would love to see that happen. The other comment, and maybe a question to you, just is, I feel like we've just got a long way to go to see that we're out of the worst of it. I've heard people commenting and saying, we still have 3 to 5 years of going down before we start coming up. And maybe just your perspective, do you think that things can turn around? You've spoken a lot about we can turn things around, but it is so incredibly broken. And the corruption is so ingrained right through all the layers of the hierarchies. How do you change that? How do you change that philosophy to start trying to improve things? And what do you see it as being the outlook?
Well, firstly, to answer your first part of that statement is we wouldn't have nearly 28,000 people supporting us and donating to us every month if there was this absolute complacency. But I agree with you, it's so sad when there are millions of people that could and should. And the average individual donation is the price of a hamburger a month. Can you forgo one sort of gourmet hamburger and a cup of coffee and donate it to civil society that essentially makes you an active citizen? Because we don't have time as individuals. We don't have time to be active citizens. We've got our family lives and our business lives. But if you can make the life of a civil society organization a little bit better, then that's great. Now, some people say 100 Rand, what's it going to make a difference? Well, if everybody said that, we wouldn't have OUTA. And is it Edmund Burke who said, the biggest mistake is the individual who gives nothing because he thinks he can only give a little. I mean, that's crazy. Just give a little. Because collectively crowdfunding works, and that's how we work. So, I think it's sad that it has to take a crisis, like Jacob Zuma removing Pravin Gordhan to spark the realization of what's happening, or the riots, to get us to rally together. That's why we've got to keep getting people to remain on board, to hear and see what it is that we're doing. And I think, the change is not an overnight one. It's not a flick of a switch. It's going to take years to fix an education system, years. It's going to take years to fix the police force, health, and so on. But unless you start, you'd never get there. So when you start and you bring in the experts, the people who are going to lead, you cannot have cabinet members that we have. Transport, Fikile Mbalula just doesn't get it. Gwede Mantashe just doesn't understand energy. They've got advisors, but it's just shocking that you have people who are so archaic and out of touch with reality heading up these policies and trying to bring about change. But what is encouraging is to see Cyril Ramaphosa stepping in and saying, well, I'm going to raise the limits of private participation in energy. We're going to do things differently. That speech that Cyril Ramaphosa gave is a speech that the Minister of Energy should have given. But he couldn't give that. He couldn't bring himself to give it. If he wrote it for him, he wouldn't read it. So those are good new policies that are coming. It will take time. And I believe when the shift, and it is going to be a fundamental shift in 2024, however that looks, when that happens and the right leadership comes in, then it's years. It's taken 3 years for the NPA to just try and get some semblance of normality internally because of all the people, the corrupt cabal that were still sitting there for so long. They literally have to move offices to set up the new teams to keep the old guard out. It's bugged. It's a mess. So it's a journey. It's going to be fraught with challenges, with problems, with frustration. But I always say we've seen countries come out of war, decimation. We've seen countries come out of Great Depression. So we're in that space. We're in that really tough space. And as you said, we can bounce back. We have the people. We have the ability. The research shows that we are more connected than what is portrayed out there by media from a cohesiveness as multiracial country. We are so supportive of each other. It's not what the populists put out there or the media. We want to work together, and we have to. So I'm excited because that journey is going to have so many tentacles to it, but it's going to be a journey for growth, for positivity, for rooting out corruption, putting in place processes, working with civil society, becoming the solution. Become part of the solution is what we keep saying. We can't sit back and complain. I speak to resident associations and they say, well, can we get some of our tax back and we'll fix our potholes here? And the municipality says, yeah, here's 10% back. And then next year they raise the rates by 10%. So they're back to where they were. And then the pipe's going and the community says to the municipal manager, we've got a water leak. You're fixing your own area now. But we were just going to fix the potholes. So they're trying to become these little islands and they build the walls higher. And the poor people across the railway tracks don't even have roads and water. we must reach out and work with them. So that's our Community Action Network, is about networking communities, working together against the same municipality. And help the poor as well at the same time. Don't think you live in an island. If you build the walls higher, they will come down. Going to be exciting. No doubt, a lot of work. Not going to happen overnight. Not going to happen overnight. There's too much invested in this country to allow it to collapse. You can't. You just cannot allow it. I speak to people every day. Their livelihoods here. I speak to people overseas who are coming back. There's no greener there. There's corruption in Europe like you can't believe. They call it lobbying and facilitation fees, and it's corruption. They're having their load shedding coming now in the UK. We have too much. We have a brilliant country. We've got to fight for it.
I think we need to draw inspiration from the fact that we are essentially a resilient people. And we must remind ourselves that the faint of heart and despondency will never overcome adversity. And we need to remind ourselves of that on a daily basis. But Anthony, I think that sets the scene for yours.
Oh, yeah. No, so I wanted to go back to, when you spoke about what's going to happen in December and in 2014. And with that in mind, would it not be better to almost look at deconstruction of the current political system? Because for me, it's not working. This thing of voting for a political party, because I'm still going to put in my friends into that political party or into ministerial positions, qualified or not, because I know that their success will benefit me and my family somehow. So I think going forward in terms of the South Africa, the future of South Africa is perhaps to even consider that deconstruction and start allowing basically individuals, just like in the States, individuals to become presidents, because then when that happens, everyone is proud of their own work. At this stage now, if as a comrade, you won't want to now, criticize your own person, because if you criticize that person, they will close other doors for you. But individuals have this sense of pride of saying, look at the work that my administration has accomplished. Whereas now at this stage, it doesn't matter who you go to. They just basically turn a blind eye and then say, hey, well, listen, this one is disagreeing with you on this matters, as we've seen. I mean, some of these so-called ministers and politicians are just gangsters in suits. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. So to your point, electoral reform is critical. That's exactly what it is. 2 years ago, we were in court with the New Nation movement. We were an amicus to that case, and the court ruled that the Parliament has to change the Electoral Act and amend it in the Constitution, because the Constitution or the Act has to be amended to line itself with the Constitution, which does say that individuals can stand. Now, we see it in local government, and we saw quite a shift in that space there. But they were given 2 years. 2 years ago, they missed the deadline in June. And they're dragging their feet. Now, why? Because all the political parties don't want this, because it threatens them. This whole proportional representative formula, it's wrong. So they've been given another 6 months to December. So now we're holding their feet to fire. But they're going to try and kick this can down the road to 2024 so that they don't have to. But you're absolutely right. If we don't fix the electoral reform system and get that reform in, then you have no say who represents you in Parliament. Those deals are done in the back rooms and corridors of the political houses. So that's such an exciting space we're in right now. And again, we've reached out to international entities now to help us to get the funding to make this happen. Let me explain to you why it's so critical. Imagine Jomat Peterson or Mosebenzi Zwane standing in the elections in a constituency against, I don't know, take the citizens out there, gift to the givers. There are many good people. Who would win? Of course, the people that the ANC put there won't win. So the ANC now will have to go and find credible people in those constituencies to stand up to win those votes. So you're 100% right. That has to happen. They don't want that to happen. So they're really dragging their feet. We are getting angry now. So the courts are now putting them under pressure. They're going to do everything they can not to let that happen. This is where civil society has to now We will call a national march if they don't get this right. We have to fix this. The second part of that is we've got to get people to understand that they must vote. 45% of the public voted in the last elections of the people that were registered. Many don't register. The youth aren't registered. And when I speak to a lot of my friends and family say, but I didn't vote because I don't know who to vote for. Well, you know, you can't have that attitude. You've got to vote for the least bad then. You've got to vote strategically. You don't have to, well, if they don't tick all the boxes that I want, I'm not going to vote for them. It's not how it works. So we have to go, and sadly the IEC should do this. They don't. So we as civil society will put together the education programs that go out there and get people aware of what they have to do. And it's so sad, we've asked them in the matric year of school, as people are turning 18 and 17, getting ready to go out there and they get the right to vote. One of the lectures, one of the lessons in this life, life orientation must be, how does Parliament work and why it's so important to vote? They don't want to do it. They just don't want to do it. Why? So another project we have on our plan, that one is a fully fledged project, but now we have to put social media is a brilliant way to educate now. So if you put really catchy, good audio-visual, short audio-visuals about stroke the conscience of people to understand Parliament and why it's important to vote, we'll get more people there. We have to do it. Government should be doing it, but we'll do it. Hopefully business will come on board and help us do that better.
Thanks for that, Wayne. Craig, unless I'm missing something, which is quite possible, I'm not seeing anyone. There's a final plea to our friends participating virtually. A question? Going once, going twice. Yeah, maybe I should do that. Yeah, certainly. We'll take the last one from now, I think, before I hand over to Prof. Klopper.
Thanks very much for an inspiring afternoon.
Thanks.
I'm not asking you questions because I completely agree with most, if not everything you say. But maybe you could comment, because I think one of the challenges when you look at the deterioration of our situation, or civil society institutions collapsing one after another, is also that we don't have a shared, it's difficult in South Africa to see a shared context, to come from a common shared context, and it's very difficult maybe for me to explain it. But I think at my age, I look back and I say that, look, we had institutions that appeared to work quite well for 6, 7, 8 million people. We're now 60 million.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is anybody here in this country, unless you really appreciate what it is. You speak to a police officer. What's your job? How do you deal with it? And most of them, I'm sure they've gone into the police with good intentions until 6 months or 7 months, and then they are all corrupt. So I think it's helpful, to look at the challenges and the gap in having a shared context. Because really, to talk about December, what's going to happen in December, it's almost quite scary.
It is.
To think about what's going to happen in 2024, of course, I'm sure it disturbs everybody. But I think for business, I hope for business with resources we have, the important thing is to support organizations like yours and more, keep them going. And I'm sure business will probably say, we can't just throw resources at you, but that's what should happen. And then say, but we can't do it forever, right?
Yeah.
And you could knock on doors. I think it's difficult in a global perspective, given, the Zondo Commission. I think for a lot of shareholders, whoever you support, whoever you go to, it is not easy. But I think it's a good thing for that support and to continue to knock more vigorously, even to Patrice one-on-one, to say you can also support this institution. But I think ultimately, the elections will come and go, and they're important, as you've said about Parliament. And the ANC probably has been in deterioration for a lot longer than
Decades,
1994,
yeah,
you know. And I think I'm speaking from personal experience here. And really just to close out, I think it's important to, and maybe the ANC is beginning to imagine life in opposition, you know. And it's nothing wrong about that. And I think business, we should say, you know, what kind of opposition are you going to be and things like that, you know. But it is on the long-term aspect that I think it's important to build organs of civil society. Our universities, our schools have to work. They have to produce, I think, somebody who can calculate properly, you know. I think business can bring in students perhaps into the world of work a lot earlier in a way that is a little bit more practical, you know. But it's just about, it's a long-term view we've got to hold. Otherwise, if you look at December and 2024, it's like light switch off. And I don't quite support that sort of view, because I think it's a long road, it's tough, and institutions like yours really need to be supported in order for us to defend what we already have.
Thanks. No, I can't agree with you more. You know, it's not difficult to join us. You just go to the OUTA website, click on join now, 5 minutes later. If you're a business, register, invoice comes to you every month. Nobody knows. I don't even know what the list is. Automatically at the end of the year, you get your Section 18A, claim half of that back, you know, from the taxman. The taxman, then that's the beauty about funding OUTA is the taxman's going to fund us. Because, so when we announce it to a lot of our businesses, they up their donation. Well, that's nice, you know. But yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to double, triple our staff size to get to the stuff that comes at us. The most frustrating thing for us is to have to turn down multi-billion rand corruption projects. It's because we can't get there. This car power ships deal, let me tell you, 220 billion rand over 20 years at the best. That was at the gas prices of 2 years ago. It was going to cripple us. And yet this blinkered view of it must happen by Gwede Mantashe. For an emergency, 20 years for an emergency energy deal. It's just crazy. So we had to go to court and stop it. That's another 3 to 4 million rand case, which we've got to dig into our reserves now. But if we don't do that, if we don't fight it, that deal they would have been celebrating it now. It would have been signed off. We had to stop NERSA from. It's sick. It's sick to have to go to court to get information that is ours. Our information. The long distance tolling is our information. As we said, we're happy to pay. It just shows how much we're paying, because we had to say to Enoch Godongwana the other day, who's frantically looking for money, well, here's an issue that we're in court on. And the only reason why we're doing this is because we believe there's 2 billion rand a year, possibly, that you can go and get your share, which is not being paid to you. Because we look at Sanral's financials, and it's like a surprise. So guys, there's more. We've got more for you in other areas. So work with us. And so we are engaging now, constructively with government. It's very difficult sometimes, because when we want to engage with them, they say, oh, you had to arrest us, or do you really want to engage? We always want to engage. We're not there to kick the doors down. But if you want to hinder the process, if we find the blatant corruption, you don't want to participate, then we're going to come after you. And that's nice. We enjoy that. We're not scared.
Wayne, from our side, please keep doing what you're doing. We've heard the last bastion, so please keep doing what you're doing. It's now my privilege to ask H.B. Klopper just for some concluding remarks and a vote of thanks. Over to you, H.B.
Thank you, Mike. I'm just going to stand here. Wayne, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, insight, for giving us insight into how you think and you operate. I take my hat off to you, and I think on behalf of everybody here, we really enjoyed the reflections for explaining to us this twin peak between politics, economics, the role of civil society. I would love to ask you in that space what keep you awake the night, but that's a discussion we want to go. And I think we also appreciate the fact of being totally honest and transparent.
Yeah.
In many ways, for us to look in the mirror and see this is reality. You talk to our conscience often, you talk to our role, the future is in our hands.
Yeah.
And I support your positivity about the country. So with that, I want to thank you, and I say also to Second Jam for hosting this. For everybody here today, we appreciate for being here, and also the online people. Those that are here and present, please join us outside for some refreshments and coffee to further the discussion. And those online, please join us next time and follow the conversation. And last of all, Wayne, just back to you, stand strong. Don't take no for answer and keep on fighting the battle. We need more people like you. We all need to be like you, so you're a real inspiration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, all the best.
Thanks.